If you're at home right now, could you do me a favor? Just look around, take it all in. Look at all the stuff that you have in your home. Appreciate what you have because as you all know, there are millions upon millions of people in the world who don't actually have a home, and it's a sad thing to see. And then there are those who have the most extravagant ones possible. From Brazilian favelas to Dina River House, here are the 20 strangest places where people actually live. Number 20. Brazilian favelas. It may be hard to believe, but people actually live in these houses. It might not be that hard to believe, though, given that these look like houses. But when you see the stacked-up styles of the favelas in Brazil, you at least understand that this is not the typical style of living that you see all over the world. These are houses that pretty much are stacked upon one another, and it paints a unique picture, even if it's one that highlights the problems in Brazil. You see, the favelas are also known as the slums of most Brazilian cities, and that's why if you were to visit Brazil, you would be told not to go to these places because there are dangerous people there and ones who would want to take advantage of you. So, another rule that you get from people who know the area is to go with someone who knows what's going on. Because if you're just out wandering around, you're bound to end up getting into trouble because you don't know the rules. But with a guide, you can see some honestly good parts of the favelas, and that's something that needs to be pointed out. Though it is the slums, there is a big art community within the favelas that has grown over the years, as many have noted after visiting the place. This spark of creativity is due to them needing to have something to potentially help them with their situation. What arguably is the most sad part of the favelas is that they're truly crammed into these stacked-up homes. One of the biggest in all of Brazil houses 100,000 people, and it's not exactly an expansive space to be living in. So what we have here is a tale of two homes, if you will. Yes, it is a place that can be inviting if you endear yourself to the local population and a creative space for those who want to try and make something out of their lives. But it's also an example of how many nations will simply push their people to the outskirts and simply expect them to survive. Number 19. The tunnels of Bucharest. In Romania, in the city of Bucharest, there are special tunnels that were once made for the city's heating system. Nothing wrong with that. But now, the tunnels of Bucharest are home to a lot of people who are merely just trying to live, and it's been rather difficult for them. But as those who have ventured down into the tunnels would note, while life can be hard there, it's also rather safe, not discriminating, and there's a sense of trying to help one another to make it to the next day. Believe it or not, these are not the only tunnels in the world that house people. A lot of people love to go to places like this as a safe haven because it's the only option available to them. It's hard to think about, but that's what some people have to do in order to live. Number 18. Sealand. Have you ever wanted to start your own country? Well, don't be afraid to say that you have, because many of us have had dreams of ruling our own roost on a large scale and showcasing just how true leadership works. We all know some nations definitely need some better leaders. But in the case of Sealand, this is both a country, a principality, and a unique story of what some people decided to do with a floating military fortress. It all began in 1943 when the British government made Ruff's Tower, a floating military fort that was meant to help them during the Second World War. And eventually, once the war was over and the use for Ruff's Tower ended, it was abandoned until a bunch of pirate radio people came in and began doing their own musical thing, which is pretty badass. Enter Major Paddy Roy Bates. After evicting the pirate radio people, he decided to do things bigger and better by making the independent Principality of Sealand, and he was very adamant about it. To the point that when some British people tried to invade his waters to set up a buoy, he and his son opened fire on them. He was brought to court, but by technicality, the platform was outside of British waters, and so he could not be charged. In 1975, he introduced a constitution for Sealand, followed by a national flag, a national anthem, a currency, passports, and an immigration stamp. And it gets even weirder because there was a coup d'etat attempt to remove him and his family from power in Sealand, and that was actually fought off. And there are some places that recognize it as the world's smallest country. Fast forward to today, and people really don't know what to make out of the whole thing. But if you go to its official website, it welcomes you to become a part of it, and you can even get a noble title. I mean, sure, why not? Number 17. Meteora monasteries. When you're a place that is protected by UNESCO, that means that you're doing something right or that you're just really, really old and somebody thinks that you're important enough in order to preserve. Sure enough, in Greece, the Meteora monasteries are hailed as one of the best tourist attractions that you can actually go and visit today. There are 6 monasteries that were built upon rocks over the course of hundreds of years, and it's hailed as one of the most important religious settings in all of Greece. Over the years, as the importance of the tourism industry would grow along with the value of a dollar, various improvements were made to the monasteries so that it would be easier to get into the place and do your thing. Dating back to the 14th century, this place is atop towering rock pillars in central Greece and originally built by monks who were seeking solitude and protection from invading forces. Originally, it was only accessible by rope ladders and baskets, and the monasteries actually served as centers of religious devotion and learning. But if you're willing and able to scale the place, you will end up experiencing something like never before, along with a breathtaking view as the entirety of the Grecian landscape will be filling up your eyeballs. Number 16. Yakuts. Now honestly, I don't know how in the world to pronounce that word, but I tried, right? Let me ask you a question. How cold are you right now? I mean, depending on which season and area that you're living in, you could be quite cold or not at all. But if you live in this place in Siberia, which I can't pronounce, you wouldn't even know what warm was because it's the coldest city in the entire world. Now, I know that Siberia is cold on its own, yeah, which is why it's not really one of the most populated places around. But here in this place, there are over 300,000 people who live there, which is insane to think about given the freezing temperatures. The reason they endure the cold is because there's a diamond mine there that needs workers, and they get paid well enough to harvest them. But just how cold could it be? Well, how about minus 60 degrees Celsius, if not colder? And yet they persist, and apparently, the people are quite proud that they're able to endure such harsh conditions, as it showcases their toughness and ability to overcome. While that is something to be respected, and I honor their ability to endure, I'm really glad that I don't have to live there because that cold, well, that's just terrible. I mean, why endure negative temperatures that can turn you into an icicle? Now it's time for today's topic. It may be hard to believe, but people actually live in these houses. Nestled on the edge of volcanic terrain in Iceland, this luxurious home is perched dangerously close to flowing lava pools. The stark contrast between the sleek, modern architecture and the raw power of nature creates a breathtaking, almost surreal landscape. Designed to blend seamlessly with the rugged surroundings, the house offers panoramic views of the Atlantic Ocean while being set against a backdrop of molten lava that cascades down like a fiery waterfall. The residents who choose to live here are not just thrill seekers, but people who are drawn to the unique energy of the land. Living near an active volcanic region comes with its challenges and risks, but the allure of such a one-of-a-kind location is undeniable. The geothermal heat from the nearby lava provides a natural heating system, and the surrounding volcanic rock adds a sense of isolation, making it the perfect retreat from the world. Despite the awe-inspiring beauty, experts have raised concerns about the long-term viability of living in such close proximity to active lava flows. But for now, this home remains one of the most intriguing places on Earth to live, combining luxury with the untamed forces of nature. Number 15. Floating villages in Cambodia. From a floating country to a set of floating villages, we now head over to Cambodia for another unique look at life. Specifically, we're going to look at the people who live on Tunnel Sap Lake and have literal floating homes through which they attempt to live, which is anything but easy. But why is that? Well, first off, the reason these villages exist was because of a regime change that was forcing the people of multiple ethnic backgrounds who were in the country for work to return home, except that they couldn't. And because they weren't legal residents of Cambodia, they couldn't buy land to try and live. So they simply built homes out on the lake, where they have just enough to survive and use the lake and its many resources to try and get by each and every day. They work on the lake, they sell goods on the lake, they travel, and even wash themselves and their property in the lake's waters. And while many consider these floating villages to be a tourist attraction, it's more of a reminder of how far people are willing to go just to have someplace to be and live. Number 14. Freedom Cove. Now before, I showed you the floating villages of the people of Cambodia, but now we're going off the coast of British Columbia in Canada to show you Freedom Cove, a floating man-made island of sorts which houses a couple that proudly boasts that they live on the ocean, and they're more than happy with not setting foot on dry land all that often. But how exactly does that work? Well, it's simple really. It all sits atop about a dozen interlocking steel doors that creator Wayne Adams had salvaged from an old fishing farm. In fact, everything is fashioned from reclaimed material, a habitat designed from what's available when it's available. Him and his wife live together on their floating cove, and they're able to make everything work for them, which includes being able to grow their own food via the areas that they've cultivated. They do occasionally have to go into town, but it's quite the rare occurrence because they've been able to be self-sustaining for quite some time. The couple are constantly working and reworking things on their cove, but they don't seem to mind. In fact, the artistic duo believe that they want to stay there for the rest of their days, and they have the potential to do just that. Oh, and they also feed bald eagles that fly into their cove on the regular, so as one does. Number 13. Island Lodge. Moving on to a classic that many of you have likely heard of in our long string of places that I can't pronounce, or at the very least, you've seen this one once upon a time. Specifically, you may have seen this picture. Yes, it is of a real island near Iceland, and upon it rests a single white house. The house appears tiny compared to the rest of the island, and yet it is there, and nothing else that's man-made exists there. So, when people started seeing this house on the internet, they began speculating about what it was, who had made it, how it got there, and so on. But that just led to a whole lot of rumors, lies, and incorrect stories. So, good thing for you, I'm here to clear all of that up. First, yes, it is a real house. In fact, it's what's considered to be a lodge, and that is where the truth lies. It was built as a hunting lodge for people to be able to go and hunt the local wildlife on the island. It was eventually abandoned, and technically nobody lives there today, which might be for the best because it doesn't have any kind of running water or any other pleasurable amenities about it. Number 12. China's Cliff Village. Have you ever metaphorically felt that you were dangling off the side of a cliff? For some people in China, they go through that each and every day. This 200-year-old village was made famous all thanks to its 800-meter ladders that the people, which include the children, have to use to climb up and down the cliff in order to reach the rest of the world each and every day. Now, it's crazy to think that they've all lived up that high, but they did it and they weren't poor either. It would just take them quite the long time to get up and down so that they could do what they had to do in order to live. The village, known as Achelor, became a symbol of endurance and resilience, with residents scaling these ladders multiple times a week to trade goods or send their children to school. For decades, these makeshift ladders were made from vines and bamboo, but in recent years, they were upgraded to steel, making the journey somewhat safer but no less daunting. Eventually, the Chinese government stepped in and built new modern homes at ground level as part of a poverty alleviation project, offering the villagers a safer and more convenient lifestyle. Although many residents have adjusted well to life off the cliff, they still cherish their old way of life, which is now a key part of their heritage and story. Number 11. Sentinel Delas Bodegas. Now, I just showed you a place that was built into the side of a mountain, but how about showing you some places that were built beneath and underneath a canyon? This is a unique white village in Spain that indeed has houses placed within and under the canyon rock faces that are so numerous that there are parts where you can literally see massive rocks hanging over, and the houses that support it. Oh, and by white village, I mean the color of the houses. The canyon itself was carved out by an ancient creek that is much smaller today. But because of its handiwork, the place was perfect to have olive fields and other agricultural places such as wineries. That was what this place was known for originally. While it's lessened in winemaking in recent times, it's actually still beautiful to see and has quite the sights and wonders, including, again, the houses that are within and under the giant rocks. It's honestly a little freaky seeing all of the rocks that people just walk under casually, but that just reflects how safe the people feel and how confident they are in the construction of the homes. One thing that should be mentioned is that there are parts of this place that are above the ground and the canyon, including a beautiful tower that people love to visit. But even when you look at the place from a side view, it's incredible to see the houses both above and below the canyon line. If anything, this is a testament to human engineering and the ability to make a home just about anywhere that they want, which is something that we'll be highlighting quite a bit as we continue with this list. Number 10. Halat China. Given everything that you've seen by now, you may be curious about the next weird place that I'm about to unveil that people do actually live in. I've shown you cave homes, stacked up homes, weirdly shaped homes, and more. So could there be anything that could truly top all of that? Well, how about cloned homes? Here's another example in Hallstatt that you may know about, except for the fact that it's in Austria. It's a very old-school place that even has UNESCO protections in it due to its wondrous architecture that has been around for hundreds of years. But if you go to Hallstatt in China, you'll actually see the exact same architecture and even it looking aged, despite the fact that it was built much more recently. So what is it that's going on here? Well, the answer is that China has been obsessed recently with recreating landmarks and places from around the world and then putting them inside of their country. Their goal with this is manifold, but it is indeed a Chinese construction company that has cloned an entire village just so that people in China could live in it as well. Though curiously, it was apparently constructed to house the wealthy in China, which says a lot in our minds. Going back to the various cloning projects, China has been bent on trying to help spread out their population away from places like Shanghai and other densely populated areas. The idea is that people would be drawn to places like this and then be up for moving into them. Now, it is a nice idea in theory, but I know there are problems with that kind of logic, not the least of which is that some of these cloned areas, including ones that were meant to be a replica of the UK, are not as populated as you would expect. Many people don't actually care for these kinds of places, and then the ones who can afford to get houses there only use them as a kind of second home. Even with all of these clear flaws, China apparently is bent on trying to keep the project alive. Number 9. Madonna Dela Corona Sanctuary. Here's another place that seems to be hanging from a rock, which, as we all know by now, is not an odd thing to see in the world. It's rather common if you know where to look. Near Verona, you'll find the sanctuary of Madonna della Corona, which is a sacred religious site that has been a place of pilgrimage for many people for hundreds of years and is definitely not a bar owned by the singer Madonna. The good news is that while it is up high, you can get there easier now than you could have in the past, as they've overhauled the foot road that you can take to get there. The Madonna della Corona is a significant place of worship for Catholics who come to pray and seek solace within its peaceful surroundings. The sanctuary is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and its altar features a statue of Madonna and Child. Number 8. Mount Fanjing. Remember how I talked about the dedication of monks and how they're willing to go to extreme lengths for their faith? Well, here's another example of that in China. Up on Mount Fanjing, you'll find not one but two Buddhist temples that are hundreds of meters off the ground. The two temples on top of the mountain were each constructed on separate peaks, and guests have to cross a small bridge in order to traverse the crevice between them. You should be sure not to look down when you do that, but there's an 8,000-step ascent that you'll have to do just to get to the temples, so good luck with that. However, if you're able to brave the heights, you'll end up seeing the Chinese landscape like never before, and you'll be in awe not only of the beauty but at the work that it took to construct these places that were so high up. The temples themselves are a symbol of peace and spiritual elevation, representing the monks' desire to be closer to enlightenment by situating their worship spaces above the clouds. These structures, despite being built centuries ago, have withstood the test of time and nature, showing the incredible craftsmanship and dedication of those who built them. Pilgrims from all over the world visit these temples not just for their religious significance, but also for the sheer adventure that the journey provides. It's a breathtaking combination of faith, history, and natural beauty that draws people in year after year. Number 7. The Hanging Temple of Hengshan. Given how glum the last entry was at times, how about we spice it up now with a little bit of this next one? If you go to China, especially to the southeast of Datong, you'll eventually come across a mysterious wonder known as the Hanging Temple of Hengshan. It's called the Hanging Temple because it's literally built into the rock face of the nearby mountain, and many people wonder how gravity hasn't laid it low. But it hasn't, and it's been there for quite a while. Plus, the temple is not small. It has over 40 rooms and a bunch of passageways for you to walk in, should you be brave enough to rise up to it. The temple is said to have been built by a monk during the late Northern Wei dynasty, which was between 386 and 534, and restored in 1900. It was constructed by drilling holes into the cliffside, into which the poles that hold up the temple are set. Now, picture that for a moment. A monk was able to drill holes into a mountain long before high-powered drilling tools were made, and then just used basic poles to keep the temple afloat. That's not only creativity, it might well be genius, because monks don't get enough credit for their brilliance. Another interesting element to this temple, which is still in use to this day, is that Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are all practiced there. Traditionally, temples like this would suit one belief system, but this one opens its gates to multiple beliefs, which is very progressive. Oh, and since we forgot to mention it before, the entire thing is 30 meters above the ground. And what we have here is the perfect representation of the dedication of a monk and how far people are willing to go for their faith. And, given that the temple is still standing, who are we to deny their faith and dedication? Number 6. Casa do Penedo. This so-called boulder house is absolutely one that you will find in Portugal, and you can even rent it out if you feel bold enough to stay in it for a while. Believe it or not, this stone castle was built not only using natural rocks that were nearby, but as a vacation home for a family that lived in the area. The things that people will do for a good vacation. They had to move out when people kept flocking to see their rock home. So what's the appeal of this place exactly? It does function as a working home, which includes having a kitchen to cook in, but it also serves as a place without electricity, so you can unplug and enjoy all the natural ways of life. The thick stone walls also provide excellent insulation, keeping the house cool in summer and warm in winter, making it surprisingly comfortable despite its rugged appearance. The house has become a popular tourist attraction, drawing curious visitors from around the world who are intrigued by its flint stones-like charm. In fact, it's so unique that some have even likened it to a real-life hobbit home, tucked away in the mountains. Staying here is more than just an escape. It's like stepping back in time to experience true simplicity. Number 5. Villa Girasol. In 99.9% of the homes in the world, they always have a problem of never truly facing the sun all the time in order to get the benefit of its light and heat. But for Villa Girasol in Italy, that is not really a problem at all. The villa, built in the 1930s, was constructed with one singular and simple purpose: to rotate itself so that it would always be facing the sun. Yes, it is real, and in fact, it got its inspiration from a sunflower, which always faces the sun to absorb its rays. Motors help to move the villa on tracks so that the sun is always in view. This rotating structure was designed by engineer Angelo Invernizzi, and it was a remarkable feat of engineering for its time. It takes about 9 hours for the villa to complete a full 360-degree rotation, and it does so almost silently. Not only was the rotating feature innovative, but the villa's modernist architecture also caught the attention of design enthusiasts around the world. Might it be weird? Well, I don't know. It seems kind of cool to me and also really, really creative. Number 4. Ponte Vecchio. Now, I've been to Italy a few times, so why not one more stop? The Ponte Vecchio, aka the Old Bridge, is one of the most secret places in all of Italy to visit. And when you go there, you may notice how different the bridge looks compared to any other thing that you may have seen. That's because both within and without the bridge, there are shops that have been in function for quite a long time. It used to be occupied by certain kinds of professions like blacksmiths, but they drove people away with the noise, so people with more quiet and higher-paying professions were put into the shops, and it still remains to this day. Over time, the bridge became a hub for goldsmiths and jewelers, adding an air of sophistication to this historic site. During World War II, the Ponte Vecchio was the only bridge in Florence spared from destruction by the retreating German forces, a testament to its cultural significance. There's even a so-called secret passage, the Vasari Corridor, which connects the Uffizi Gallery to the Pitti Palace. It's so special it was referenced in the book Dante's Inferno, but unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, it will not lead you to the underworld. Instead, it served as a private route for the ruling Medici family to move through the city without mixing with the public. Number 3. Kuber Pedy. I've shown you plenty of interesting homes up until now on this list, and yet when we look at the events that surround Kuber Pedy in Australia, we can't help but be amazed at the people who took what was a seemingly terrible situation in the environmental sense and then transformed it into something quite positive that they're still enjoying to this day. Now, Kuber Pedy is down under, and it's an opal mining town. Not only do they mine opals there, but they mine a whole heck of a lot of them washed in from previous deposits. It was potentially the biggest opal mining operation in the world at one time when they started back in 1916, and that would lead them to digging up lots and lots of holes in the ground. The problem with this is that during the summer, it would get really, really hot there. And I'm not just talking about a few degrees above kind of hot. I'm talking about boiling to the point where you could cook an egg on the cement kind of hot. The thing that you would beg for was air conditioning to work, and yet it never would. But what were they supposed to do then in that case? Well, they couldn't just blot out the sun, so they used what they had around them, which was the mines. That's right, 2,500 people said, "Screw this heat," and then they went to live in the caves and the tunnels that they had dug out previously. Did it work? Well, yeah, it actually did. The caves weren't only cooler, but they were cooler by dozens of degrees. So without the hot sun beating down on them, they could live a regular life, so to speak. It's thought that actually about 80% of the population of Kuber Pedy is inside of those caves, and they have a lot inside of their homes as well. There are houses, churches, schools, and even hotels where you can rent a room, and they have electricity and other amenities that you would want in a home. So it turns out that they do live quite well. Now, that's not to say they don't come up for air because they have to at times in order to get food and retrieve water and other things, but most of the time you can just find them chilling out in their caves, and that's pretty cool in my book. Number 2. Matmaada. Given what you've seen with Kuber Pedy, the Matmaada village in Tunisia should not be all that much of a surprise. These people not only dug themselves a massive pit, but then went and dug themselves homes into the nearby caves so that they could have a sound structure to call home. Yet another case of people using what was around them in order to make a nice living for themselves. The cave homes provide a natural form of insulation, keeping them cool during the blistering heat of the day and warm during the chilly desert nights. But even when the buildings began to collapse due to weather and other factors, the people simply rebuilt the homes and then went right back to living inside of them. The resilience of the Matmaada villagers is truly remarkable, and their homes have stood the test of time, showing that innovation doesn't always require modern technology. In fact, the area has gained international attention due to its use in the Star Wars films, with some of the homes even serving as the set for Luke Skywalker's house on Tatooine. It might be kind of weird, but it also shows that sometimes people enjoy where they live, even if it may be odd to everyone else who views it from the outside with a closed-off and ignorant mind. Number 1. Dina River House. Yes, this is a real place, and it has become quite the attraction over in Serbia. The Dina River House has very humble origins, as it was built by a couple of people who merely wanted to have a place to relax after going swimming in the river. They began small, and then slowly they built up the house to what it looks like now. And if you're wondering why they stacked it up like that, well, that's because the river would occasionally rise, and this would help the house to not be washed away. However, it hasn't been immune to the forces of nature. Floods have swept it away multiple times. But the locals, resilient as ever, continue to rebuild it after each disaster, determined to keep the quirky landmark alive. In fact, the house has become a beloved symbol of perseverance, representing the community's strong bond with the river. It now attracts tourists from all over the world, each eager to see the charming little house defying the current once again. That wraps up our exploration of people living in truly unusual homes. Were you surprised by their choices? And which home did you find the strangest? Maybe you know of another odd home that should have made our list. Share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other cool content on the screen, and I'll see you next time.